Okay, hi everyone. I hope everybody can see me. I'm Ankit Maini, and I work as a front-end engineer in Flipkart. And today we'll be talking about how to solve internationalization, like adding support for multiple languages in your app. And we'll also learn a bit about TypeScript and how you can use TypeScript to your advantage. And we will write very less code. We will try and write as less code as possible to achieve that thing. And let's see the deck. So this is my introduction, and this is my ID across all social media, whether it's GitHub, Twitter, Instagram, or anything. You can find me here. And yeah, so let's imagine that you're building an app, and it is the coolest and greatest ever, right? And yeah, this is literally the coolest and greatest app ever. And it's going great. You are doing amazing. You are not writing any test. You are just adding features, and the app is hit. And you have transformed from a startup to a big company. But until your PM said that we need to talk, and since our app is doing great, we need to capture more market areas and going deeper into regions. And what that means is that you need to add language support to your app. So if your app is working just in English, you might need to add certain regional languages. If you want to go international, you want to add international languages like Spanish, Portuguese, or anything, right? So you thought easy peasy, right? And you would do what you always do. You would just go and just Google it. And I always add best for any query because why not? You should always use the best things. And the moment you type this, you see that there are about 340,000 results in 0.39 seconds. And now you are drowning in documentation, you are drowning in blog posts, medium articles, libraries, and your own code and your deadlines. But but when you go through those libraries, there's so much that they are doing, but your use case is very simple. You just want to add certain text for different languages, and you don't need to understand their internal architecture. You don't want to change your project in a big way, and you just want to do it as you are growing. So let's see how what does it take to roll one of your one of your own internationalization frameworks. But before we do that, we would need to see what we need to keep track of. So if you see from a standpoint of a framework or a library, there are just two things that you need to keep track of: the selected language. Let's say you the current selected language. Let's say I'm on English, so the English would be my current selected language, and the correct message for that language. And if I've chosen Hindi, so the language, the ID or the message would change because of the language. So let's say, how would you do it? So let's say this is your app entry point, and you're not doing here. I'm not showing the complete app. This is just the entry point of your app, and you are just entering children. So let's say you want to keep track of the language. So what you would do is at the top of your app, you could define a state. I'm not saying that you would do it this way, but we are just seeing how will we progress to something that we can use and which is also scalable. So what you can do is you can just use a use state. So this is how you define state in React, and you can give it an argument. Let's say I want to default set my language to English, and then there are these two things that use state gives you. Use state comes from React. I have forgotten to import it, but it's all right. So you get language, and then you can change this language by doing set language, right? So but if you see your entire component sitemap, so this is your app which knows about your language, and then this app has three subroutes: home, about, blah, and then it has again three subroutes, and there are so many children, and you only know that the language of the app is here, but there can be so many messages and strings here which you need to change as well. So what you would do, you would pass from your app to every different component the current selected language. I mean, this was so much work that while even creating this image, I slept. And imagine doing it actually on your code. So there's a name for this phenomena, and it's called prop drilling. And you can see that we are drilling this language prop into every component. And if you forgot somewhere, you would not be able to do that in this child 2. So if you need to render some message correctly at child 2, all of this needs to be passed at every single level. But thankfully, we will not do prop drilling today. There's no point in doing this. So how can you get around this convenience that you have something defined in your app at the top level and you need it in every single component? What if we change this control? So instead of sending down everything, what if your app could, so this is your component, this can be a child level component. What if this could actually figure out or actually ask or look up the correct string or the current language that it wants to use? So what we are doing here is that any, so this solution that we will talk today is not specific to React Native, but I demo that in React Native because it's a React Native meetup, but you can take the same concept and apply it to a React or any other project. And this will work mostly for React because this is on certain tenets and concepts on which React is built on. So what this text span or div would do is it can ask at the runtime that give me the correct translation for, let's say, coolest. Coolest is the ID. So how can we do that? How what So once I say a global store, which means that it is available to all components, and once I say global store, what thing is does come to your mind? Any? I'm looking at the chat right now. Okay, Redux MobX, 100% correct Redux. But if you are hanging around on Twitter and internet, you would know that people bash a lot about Redux, and there are some people that hate Redux, but actually I love Redux, and they do that because they say that there's so much ceremony there, and they don't want to write that much code. So so whatever solution that we'll discuss here can also be done with Redux, but today we'll not do Redux, and we will use everybody's favorite. And I think somebody has also context. Okay, somebody has said context. A lot of people have said context. Very good. So I knew what is everybody's favorite, and I did a lot of research. So we will use context, and using, we will not just use context, and there's a name for this pattern which is called provider pattern. And now, since I always lead with examples, I would also want to list in front of you the earliest known. If you go to the history of context, you will see the earliest documented example of context. If everybody can see my screen, what is this? Can somebody, there is a hint already here. I'm not able to listen anybody. Okay, read. Yes. So every library that you use probably uses provider pattern. So how Redux uses is, I will not go into the details of it. It stores this your actual Redux store in a provider, and then you can use that connect function. So this is how your Redux provider pattern works. But we will not uh, delve into Redux, but I just wanted to bring in front of you like what is provider. So in provider, what you do is you wrap your entire app with a provider component, and from that provider can give you certain values because its name is provider. It can provide you certain values which you can query from any component which is deep in your tree. So, okay, we have our to-do list ready. So we have two things to do. We have to write a provider to wrap the app, and a convenience component to render strings and text, right? Which will query. So this second component will actually query from the provider the things that the provider is giving, which is called the context. And this convenient component would query from the context whatever it needs. We'll see. We'll see as it comes. Okay, so let's write some code. Is everybody feeling energetic, excited, or they have already slept? Okay, okay, cool. So people are still with me. Okay, so we will start very simple. So this is, I think this is the longest thing. The name is just the longest here, but it does nothing. What it does is just renders your children. So we are not writing actual provider here. We are just setting placeholders, so that we are just setting the bridge so that things would work as soon as we add in this. So the simplest provider can be, it can just render your children. It doesn't use context right now. It's just a simple component called provider, right? So and what do provider do? So this was the implementation of provider. It renders children, but you have to use this provider for it to be usable. So what will we do? So let's say this was your entire app. What I'll do is I'll wrap my app with this internationalization provider. Cool, simple. And Now we come to the difficult part. So now we need to add stuff to internationalization provider, which will help us translate those strings at runtime, correct, or at build time. I mean, I there's a small distinction there. What is happening at runtime, what is happening at build time, and by the end of the slide, we would be able to answer those questions. So now we have to add this stuff to internationalization provider. Let's say, and I think there are two things that we would need: change language, because at any component you can just say I want to change my language from English to Hindi, or from Chinese, or Russian, or whatever. And then there's this translate, that what is the correct translation of this word. So let's say you want to show coolest there, and at any point of time you want to answer that, given my current language, which this internationalization provider would be keeping track of. We are hoping that it would keep track of, and it would give us a correct translation. We would just say translate this word. And before we do this, before we go and implementing, we would also try and talk about how will you store your translation. So generally people store these translation in JSON files, or because this will be an API response also, you can get. So let's say you want to change your language on the fly, you can get from your server like what are the correct strings. So let's say high is high, coolest is coolest, and greatest is greatest. And if you want to change this language, so see, your keys are not changing. Your keys high, coolest, and greatest would be constant, but just the actual translation of it, or the value of it, would change. So it's like key value. Your key always remains the same, but your value gets changed based on the language that you are selected. So en means English. So let's say this is an english.json file, and we have hindi.json also. So high is namaste, coolest sabse acha, and greatest is mahantam. So so once, so if you see that this, since these keys are not changing, so it should work. Theoretically it should work. So let's see how we can use this in our provider. So in our provider, if you saw earlier, we just had this, we were not doing anything, we were just rendering plain children. So so now what we are doing is we are just importing these different languages messages. So I'm assuming, since this is a demo, I'm importing both of these languages together. But what I'm assuming is people who want to implement this, they would just have one, let's say, base language imported as part of their code, and not everything else, because this would increase your bundle size, and it would, and for every new message change, you would have to do a deployment. So we'll come to that later in the question answer part. We can decide strategies on where do we store strings, how do we retrieve it, and all that. But for simplicity, let's assume that you have everything you need here, right? So you have English strings also, you have Hindi strings also, and then there's a small type of languages that you can have only two languages, en and Hindi. So if somebody would try and give gibberish, let's say ABC, this language's type would fail. So this is the TypeScript construct. Next, what we do is we want to create that context. So in our provider function, what we would do is we would want this translate function, which would give us the correct language. So this create context is just a function. We have not set a context with this now. So what does this do is it is keeping a small map of translations, and translations is a key value pair. So for each language, it is containing the strings. So now English strings also, if you saw, English strings is also a key value pair. So if you see here, this is also key value. So this is the translation files. And what we are doing here is, for each language, we are storing this translation files, right? And then there's a translate function. And what you would call the translate function, so let's say you want to get the correct translation of high. So what you would do is you would just say translate, and you would just pass high, which is a string. And what it would do is it would go, and since the language is already specified here, it would go to the, so let's say language is English, it would go here in the translations object. It will select this en language, and inside this, it would just give the value of the string high. So this is how simple it is to make it work. And so this is our actual context. So what we need to do is we need to add some ceremony. So React has this API called react.createContext, and you would need to do this, otherwise it will not refresh on any time the context changes. This would just be a plain JavaScript value. So once we have this context defined, what we have to do is, this is a syntax of React, that you have to wrap your children with context.provider, so that in your children you can only query values which are provided in this value, right? So as we see here, create context is an object. So it gives us two values, language and translate. We probably might not want to use language, but we will always use translate. correct? So our provider is set, and it looks great, but how do you use this? So we earlier talked that we have two things to do. We have to create a provider, which is partially done, and then we have to write a convenience component to render strings. So you can define in the same file for convenience that this is your simple component. What it does is it also takes that ID, because that is the ID that we want to translate. So let's say hi, I want to translate the ID hi message in English as well as Hindi form. So what I'm doing here is this use context is also provided from React so that you can read that context. And since we know that context, our context has an object in its memory, so it looks like translate and language. So we don't need language now. We just want to translate that whatever ID that I'm passing here as props, you just translate that ID. And how do you use this? So anywhere you don't need to now know about any provider. At any component, you can just, instead of text, you can just do translation text and ID coolest. And let's just see how it works. So this is, let's say, coolest, and if you see an app here, there is nothing going on in here. This is a standard boilerplate of React that I've just copied, and this is the internationalization file. There is less than 30 lines of code, and there are some white spaces. So this is what we just saw in the slides, that this create context will return two things, and this is how you would create. And at the bottom of this is our convenient component translation text, which I'm using in app. So in app, if you see, I think everybody is able to see. Can people? Okay, cool. People are able to see. So if you change here, and this string is here. So if I change greatest, it should change to greatest. And what we'll do is, just to change the language, instead of giving programmatic controls, I'll just do Hindi here, and it should just work, right? So you are not specifying what is here, and it is taking at runtime, or whatever language is set, it is actually calculating this for you. And I think this is working. Wow. And I always praise my own code because nobody else does. Okay, so but you think this is too good to be true, right? Life is not this easy. And what I mean by this is, you will never have such a simple use case that will just get converted, right? So what else can you get? So recently, there was a big sale in Flipkart. I hope everybody would have bought something. And if you see the message, so this is a screenshot from Flipkart app. And if you see here, there's this bank offer, 10% off on HSBC credit cards, up to 1500 on orders of 5000 and above. Now, what do you think? Will these messages be hard coded, or will they be coming from an API, or will they be stored in UI? No, right? These are just templates, and we are just filling these values. So these messages, so 10% can be a variable. This card can be a variable. This HSBC can be Kotak or anything, right? These are variables. So these are called interpolations. So let's say your template looks like this. Hi, name. So name is a variable, which is, I have shown that in curly braces, so that you understand that this is not normal text. This is a variable, and this is a string that is coming to you. This is a message. And so similarly, discount is also only valid for you, valid till this hour. So if you see that there are three variables in play, and if you replace these three values, you will get the actual message. Correct. So we would need to support this, because we can't ignore this use case. This is too big to ignore. So how can we solve that? So before solving anything, I just want to show you how your message would look like. So everything would remain the same. So instead of these plain static messages, now we have certain dynamic interpolations to do. So what this means is that when this discount, so let's say this discount ID, when you would use to render, you should pass name and discount, which would be replaced in this string. Cool, simple enough. And so this was our simple translate function. What it was doing was, it was just taking the ID, and it was not replacing anything. But now we will have to do little more work to replace those values. So what we'll do is, we will just find out whether that message actually has some interpolations or not. So we'll use a simple regex to check whether they are separated by curly braces or not. And if there are interpolations, Then for each interpolation, what we'll do is we will just extract that variable name. And since if you see here, these are the attributes that user would pass. So let's say if that interpolation contains name, so what I would do is I would just replace that interpolation with the value of the name variable that the user has passed. And if it becomes a little I think I'll have, okay. So just to show you an example, I hope my screen is visible and console is big enough. So let's say what I'm doing here is this is the string, and if you apply this regex that is applied here on this line which I showed you above, what it'll do is it will give you an array of these interpolations. So now this is called as an interpolation, and what we are doing here is, since this name curly braces, there's some simple logic which is slicing off those two curly braces. So you just get the name variable, and then the name would exactly match what the user would pass. And this is how you would use it. So if I want to use discount, what I'll have to do is I'll have to pass name and the values which it could be replaced with. Okay, I'll just show you very quickly. So if I already have this code in, okay, I don't have this. Okay, I have to unselect. Okay, so this is the code that I was talking about, that we have done interpolations. And if you check app.js, there's this discount. So if I change this, hi is nobody's name, John Doe. So if you see, it gets changed here. And I've added some simple buttons also for you to see that you can just change language and it just works and not faking it. Okay, so since this works, let's get this out of the way and proceed further. Are people getting this? Okay, cool, cool. Okay, I can see a lot of thumbs up. Cool. So this is the base, and there's some fun surprise which is coming your way. So don't just sleep off yet. And I hope everybody's getting my jokes. Okay. So it works, but TS integration sucks, right? And Toby also said that you should use TS, and everybody says that you should use TS because it makes you less errors. You can catch your errors at dev time. So there's no type safety. I can give any ID. There is no IntelliSense autocomplete. Nobody hints me that what are the interpolations. So unless until I go and look at these messages. So let's say I want to use this discount ID, correct? And since I've stored all of these IDs in my folder messages, and since this discount and name, unless until I go and see this file, I would not know that I have to pass name and discount. And what I can still do is, instead of discount, since my English sucks, and I can just wrongly spell it. And what happens is, if you see, since this is undefined, and if you have a really long message, you might, since this is undefined, you can have a logic there which would just omit this, and you would not even know whether this message is correct or not. So there's nobody telling us that you are doing correct, you are doing wrong, and it is just up to individual devs, which we do not want, right? And I think that's why everybody has come to this talk. So but how can TS work though? So if you see that we are working on these strings which are defined in JSON file, they are not in some Typescript file that you can just create structures for it. There's no mapping available. And so the bottom line is very difficult. So there's one. So before preparing this talk yesterday, I googled search that how do you do type safety in internationalization, and I saw some blog post which said that you can put all your messages in a TS file, which did not seem very correct to me. I mean, just because we want to make it easy for us, we are breaking the entire flexibility that if it is JSON, you can get it via API, or you can do anything, right? You can get it from a serverless function, you can store it somewhere, and it's just a JSON variable. And most of the times devs do not write these translations. There's someone from copywriting team or someone from ops or someone else does it, right? So they would not be handily very handy with TS files. So let's say if things magically work, right? What do we need actually to make those things magically work? So first thing is we need to do type safety on ID. So what do I mean by ID is, so let's say this is coolest, right? So and since this is a TSX file, what if I say ABC? So there's nothing stopping me here. And if you see, like, nothing would get printed here, so this message has gone empty, so nothing is telling me. So first and foremost, what we want to do is we want to restrict the IDs that you can send to this component. So how can we do this? So I have added a link here, and so this link is of a playground. So what you can do is, if you have a type of a union type which just had high, coolest, greatest, and discount, what you can do is you can have this keys, and you can attach this keys to the prop. So you would be forced to, so the user would be forced to write any of these, and if you do not write any of these, then you would probably get an error. But then defining these types manually is such a big task, and nobody will do it. So what can we do? So since we have a JSON file, what we can do is we can always create a generate types file here, right? I mean, you can create a Node.js file, and what it'll do is you can programmatically read this JSON. And what I'm doing here is I'm calling this base English file as a base, that this is the base that we will always include. And what I'm doing here is I've just, so since this is a JSON object, this is an object, I can always get object.keys. So if I were to console.log all keys, right, uh, what would I get? So I will just execute this command, and if you can see that I'm getting this. And what I actually need is, from this TypeScript, I just need to define type keys of this. This should be in a union fashion, right? So what I can do here is I can create a variable. Let's say my type. And since this contains everything, what I can do here is I can use, I can just do export type all keys equals to. And now here's the fun part. Since you have everything already, what we want to do is we just want to, so since this is an array, all keys is an array, you have seen that array. What I want to do is I just want to join them by union, but before joining I need to code them so that they become strings. So let's say this is the key that is coming, and what I'll do here is I will quote this key, just surround it with comma, and since this has become my new array, and I just want to join it by this. And if I now console.log my type base.map, okay, sorry, all keys.map. So if you see that you have this all keys, high, coolest, and greatest. So now what can we do here is you can always write fs dot, you can write this file, and let's say path.resolve. I will resolve to a file name which I've already created. So if you see that there's this types file which is empty, so types.ts, this we can write our values in this. So what we'll do is we'll just write directory name, source, and let's say types.ts, right? And if you now run this file, no types file, okay, I have to also pass what needs to be written. Sorry, I always get overexcited. So if you now see types has this thing, right? And in your internationalization route, you can, so you have this component, a translation text, and you see that ID is string now. So instead of that, we can make it all keys, and all keys would be imported from the types folder we just created. And since ID is all keys, that's it. And if you go now to your apps component, you can see that FDF is not assignable to type all keys. And if you see, you will get an awesome autocomplete, and it solves one of your problem. So if you see how easy it was to do something like this, like you can always define programmatically your types, and this can always be generated. Okay, did everybody get this? Okay, Gauri is my friend. Yes, written wow. Cool, Gauri. Stay tuned. We'll see some more fun things. So going back to our slides, so we have, so now ID is safe, but interpolation still is, I don't know whether this discount. So there is no mapping. I don't know when I'm using this, let's say hi, whether I need to pass certain attributes or not, right? But since we have added interpolations, if I don't add, so this hi does not need any attributes, but since the way TypeScript works, since attributes are defined, I I have to give those empty attributes to make TypeScript work. Which is, and when TypeScript attributes are important, I still do not know. I can still make an error here, and TypeScript would not cry, right? And so this is done. So interpolation TypeScript, I mean, we need some kind of mapping, right? So if you see our file here, messages.js, sorry, JSON. So for all these three, we do not need any interpolation. We only need attributes for discount. So if there was a way that if high, then you don't need any attributes. If coolest, you don't need any attributes. And if greatest, you don't need any attributes. But if discount, you need name and discount. Any ideas? How can we do this in TypeScript? Any ideas? Guys, this is a fun session. Can people speak Bhargav here?
Yeah, I have no idea. So maybe
Okay.
you can again do the same regex thing and figure out if the string contains. I don't know.
So regex will work in JavaScript, but we are in TypeScript land. Okay. So
Oh, okay.
what we will do is, so let's say these are our keys. Okay. And we somehow we need a magic function, magic utility, which would tell us that for high you do not need anything, but for discount you need those two things. Correct? These name and discount. So let's say we declared something. So this is how. So let's say a magic. You can use this magic type, and you can pass anything to it, right? And what we can check is, there's a syntax called conditional types. I'm not sure what it is called, but you can check if this extends. So instead of if corresponds to extends, and what I can say is that if my t extends, so whatever you pass in here, magic inside this argument, whatever, if that extends high, so you can use a ternary operator, and then you can say never, because I don't need anything, correct? And so for high, I don't need anything. If t extends coolest, do we need something? We don't, right? And if t extends greatest, okay, my typing is really slow. We still don't need anything. But if it is discount, right? If t extends discount, then you need, then what do you need? So you need name. So let's say you name and just any, and discount any, right? And if nothing matches, say never. And I have just made a mistake. This never need not be quoted. Never is a type in TypeScript that nothing will go in never. So that means that this should never happen. So now we have written this type, but we don't know whether it works or not. So let's test this out, and please work. And what we'll do here is, let's say we'll use magic, and we will put in high. So what should be the value of this please work? So it's never, right? It works. And let's say I again do coolest, value is never. But the real test is, if I give it discount, will this work? So now you see it exactly tells you that name and discount need to be there. So we can handle that relationship of what messages goes with what using this. But this again, you cannot type manually, like nobody can do it, right? So I think we can use the same. I think did everybody was mind blown with this? Some logic in. Okay, I think I'm the only one who got mind blown. Okay, so what we can do here is this is the same thing that what I was doing. So instead of magic, I'll call it as get translation. This would go inside that generate types, and we will go over each key and we will see whether there are any occurrences or not. And we know how to find occurrences using these curly brace regex that I've come up with after 5 days. And if there's no, so what we'll do is extends never. So what I was doing here, that if there are no occurrences, you just say never. And if there are any variables, what you would say is you map all of this together, you create that as an object, and then you say that this extends this. And finally, you say never, because that's how ternary operators work. So if we do this, it's cool. So let's see that as a demo. I think I should have. Get checkout. So all of this code is available, and I think if you see this, this is generated, and you can see here. So what we can do here is all keys. We have just not used it. It's just that it has been created. This get translation type. Now, how can we use it? So we can use it here in a manner that now we cannot give this all keys, right? Because everything now depends upon the key of it is used. So let's make this a normal function. And in just a minute, we will see how can we use this. And so React component is just a function. You can, and defining generics is little easier here. So what I can do here is I can do T, and I would define this T extends all keys. So what I want to do here is that your ID has to be one among this all keys, correct? So what I'll do here is ID. So instead of defining it in line here, I'll just define props T, which extends all keys. Oops. Which extends all keys. And now what we want to do here is if this T, so we will use this get translation type that we created here. And we still have to run that node command because it would not have generated. So now if you see types, it is now automatically generated for us. So whatever strings were there in this mapping is generated for us. And we can just use this here now. And so what I want to do here is if the result of this extends never, right? What we want to do is we want to make this attributes optional as well, because this ID is sorted. Right now we want to type this attributes. So if this extends never, that means that you don't need any interpolation. So what we can do here is we will just say that you just need an ID. You send us the ID, which is T. Otherwise what you do is so ID is necessary in both the cases, correct? ID is necessary in both the cases. But with this, what we'll do here is that we want to specify attributes also. And the type of the attributes will be the same thing that we got. So we are first evaluating it, whether we actually need it or not, so that we can make this attribute optional. So now, 1 second, we can just props T. So now if you see that this attribute, it is throwing some error that this attribute, because attribute is not able to figure it out that whether attributes will be there or not, because in one of the cases attributes is there, in the other it is not there, so it should have figured out that this is optional. So what we'll do here is we will just keep it here and we'll make it optional and we will give it never. And then there is this translate, I think translate internal function. We have not changed anything, so here it needs string. It can be undefined as well, right? So this is about it. And if you go to now your app.js, right, now you see that there are no errors. And we already saw that, okay, it has stopped working. So this is the translation. Okay, you have to export it. So if you now see this, that this works, right? Coolest. And if I do coolest, it says that attributes should not have been here. There is this expected property is not defined here. But as soon as you change it to discount, it it says that, okay, we have defined string there, so we can just typecast it to string. But if I remove this name here, just see what it'll say. So it'll exactly tell you that name is missing. So now you don't even have to look at your messages file, and it'll just work amazing for you. Okay, did people get this? Okay, okay. So so now you have a way. Okay, somebody said 50-50. I will write a detailed blog post for this so that you can understand this, and I think this would be recorded. And what we've done here is the crazy part. So we have not done anything. It's just that we have figured out this get translation, which will give you dynamically what needs to be the value of the attributes. And what we are checking here is we want to make this attributes also conditional, that we don't want people to pass in attributes even when there is nothing to pass. So what we are doing here is that if the value of this is never, because we output never from here, correct? If you see, we out the value of this would be never if there is nothing required. So what we are just checking here is that if it is never, then you just pass id and this would be never and it is optional. But if it gives you something, I don't know what it gives it, if it is not never, what you do is you again pass the id and then the attributes becomes mandatory and the value is whatever is we have decided. So this is just a small wrapper, and in like 2-3 lines of code you have gotten type safety, which I don't think is, you will find it on internet. I searched it, but you would not. So I mean, it just works. So you have I can go on praising this, but I think I'm running out of time. Am I running? Okay, it's 43 minutes. I'm really sorry. So let's just quickly see. So you can take it to another level. What you can do it, you can run it on watch as well. So instead of manually typing this, you can run it on watch. And so this is a simple node watch script. I share the code repository. What you can do here is, let's say, okay, I'll show it later. So you can watch this en.json, and as soon as that en.json would change, we will execute this generate TypeScript, and it would automatically continue to populate this types.type. So even if you added something, it would get added here. And as soon as you add anything here, you can just use it in your app.js seamlessly. So these are the links. There's one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Since now you have made the mastery over here, right? In using these ternary types and generating this, you can simplify this a bit further by, let's say, get reset. I'll just take 2 minutes. I'll just show you the answer. Get checkout. So instead of that, what you could have done is, since we are just maintaining a mapping, we can just so this is not properly formatted. So what you can do here is you can just have a object mapping. So interface is the equivalent of object in TypeScript. What you can do here is, for high it is never, for coolest it is never, and for discount it is this, right? And in your types, so this is your types, you don't have that ternary nested condition. And in your internationalization, what you can do here is you can just use this key map of t. So whatever you are passing, so this is, so how do you get a value of an object? You get, so let's say you have an object here, uh, where object equals to something, and if you want to get the value of it, what do? You do object dot key, correct? If that key is present. So since fdf is not present, it will not give you. So similarly, this key map, if you see here, this key map is an object, and what we are trying to do here is, instead of doing our magic ternary thing which I just showed you, to teach you that you might possibly hit that case that this object will not solve your condition. So that is one good thing to know, and that is what the initial topic was, that learning TypeScript on the site. So I hope you learned one thing. And but this is another thing which is even simpler. So you have this object, and this is the key. So this key extends all of those keys, and this is the thing that we defined here. And instead of using that ternary, you can just replace it with keymap.t. Then the correct value of that key would become the object. And if you see all keys, if you notice here, we used to have this all keys here, right, in types.ts, but it's no longer here. So how can you delete this? So if you go and see what we have intelligently done here, is all keys is now just key of type. So if you see all keys, so key of is an operator that you can use on an interface or an object kind of type, wherein it just works as object.key. So it will unify all your keys and give you the thing that you want. So we have eliminated most of it, and this is the final version. And if you see, this file is not even 100 lines of code, and you get such awesome things by default. And yeah, that's just it. So you have the code link here, and the deck is also shared here. I'll share this on Twitter, or I'll ask Bhargav and I'll put this into the chat link.